What's up, all of you beautiful subscribers? Welcome back to the Chapple Show. So Apple has had a really bad day. Investors are really scared. The stock is down 7%. What's going on and why is this important? We're going to talk about that. So first of all, why is this important? Well, Apple is the largest public company in the world. It might be the largest company in the world, period, but we don't really know how many of those, private Saudi oil companies are actually worth more than $1 trillion. That's a story for another time, but Apple is the largest company that we know of, it was worth over $1 trillion before today, and it's also one of the most owned stocks in the world too. I mean, I looked this up. Actually, Apple is either the number 1 or 2 most owned stock by hedge funds right now. So it's Apple and Microsoft are the 2 biggest as far as I could find. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyways, I want to talk about the earnings report. So Apple released their earnings report, and it has some investors worried, yet some investors are very happy with their earnings report. So let's see what you think, and I'll tell you what I think here. Okay, so let's talk about this. So they released their earnings report. I'll read you just a couple paragraphs through this just very quickly. So service revenue reached an all-time high of $10 billion, excluding one-time favorable adjustment of $640 million recognized in the fourth quarter of fiscal 2017. Services grew from $7.9 billion in the fourth quarter to $10 billion in the fourth quarter of fiscal 2018. They had a few other things. We're thrilled to report another breaking quarter that caps a tremendous fiscal 2018. We shipped our 2 billionth iOS device, celebrated our 10th anniversary of the App Store, and achieved the strongest revenue and earnings in Apple's history. So if you're looking at it from a pure money perspective, just on the surface of that announcement, all seems pretty good. Let's look into some of the financials. All right, let's dive a little deeper here. Revenue between $8.9 billion and, so Apple is providing the following guidance for its fiscal 2019 first quarter. So it just makes some decent projections of some growth, but they didn't mention unit sales. They did not mention the amount of sales of each item in predictions of what's going to happen for the amount of sales. That'll be important in a second here. Okay, let's keep going. Let's take a look here at this revenue. Okay, so year over year change. This looks fantastic. So Apple is $1 trillion company, and I don't know how to explain this, how to drill this into people enough. Once you become a giant company, it is so difficult to keep increasing revenue by 10, 20, 30% per year. And if you look at this here, their revenue, their total revenue year over year increase is 20%. That is astounding for $1 trillion company. That is absolutely amazing. So you look at it here on the surface, this looks good, right? Revenue increasing 20% year over year. But let's dive into this a little more. Let's take a look down here with the unit numbers. So what you might notice here is that in terms of the amount of units sold of iPhones, that remained the exact same. All right, for iPads, sales actually went down 6% in terms of the amount sold, and same with the Macs, down 2%. Services went up 17% in revenue, 31% in other products. They don't track how many of those transactions happened. That's fair enough. And so they're touting a large revenue growth here. So if you look on the revenue for each of these items, revenue for the iPhone increased 29%, iPad decreased 15%, that's not good, and the Mac increased by 3%. So overall, revenue looks really good, but sales numbers are looking a little iffy here. So obviously what this means is that Apple has been increasing revenues by simply just increasing the price of their products. You see, they're able to do this because they know you're addicted. They know you're addicted to the Apple products. They know that you want the new shiny thing, even if it's a marginal upgrade. They're like a crack dealer in a sense, right? It's just like they know you're addicted. They know you're going to keep coming back, and so they're like, hey, we're gonna keep upping the prices a little bit here and there, and they know that you're going to keep coming back. And then eventually the crack dealer is like, hey, I got this new stuff here. It's a lot better. It's way better. Look at this. Look at these massive improvements to the product. Meanwhile, they're just very marginal improvements. But it's a shiny new thing you get to try out. Then when you try it out for the first time, it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then after you use it over and over again, it's like, oh, this is getting a little bit stale. But then they release a new thing. And that's kind of Apple's over the last 10, 15 years or so. That's what they've been doing. They've just been updating their products and not really innovating too much. This has happened since Steve Jobs. you guys know Steve Jobs. Like he's not the idle entrepreneur guy that everyone says he is. In my opinion, he's one of the best marketers of all time. He's one of the greats, definitely, but he's not like he shouldn't be the number one on the pedestal of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time, in my opinion, as a lot of people have him. But say what you will, all the negatives, Apple's innovation correlated almost exactly with the time that Steve Jobs was the CEO of the company. When Apple started out, they were making brand new computers. They made an operating system with him and Wozniak. They made the Apple II, and then he got fired. Well, he got fired / resigned, right? And then Apple was crap for 12 years. He went to go off and make Pixar, by the way. He made Pixar when he left Apple, and no one remembers that. I made a whole video on that, which you could check out on my channel. That made him a billionaire. It wasn't Apple. And then he came back to Apple, and then what do you know? iTunes happens, iPod happens, iTouch, and then the iPhone, right? And it all accumulates into this giant Apple innovative ecosystem. And since then, I mean, what have you had? Like the iPad, new MacBooks, not too much innovation from my perspective. That is groundbreaking. So they've obviously updated and innovated a little bit, but in my opinion, it's correlated with Steve Jobs. Anyways, we're gonna get back to this Apple stock here. I went too much on a Steve Jobs tangent there. Okay, so again, they know you're addicted. You're gonna keep coming back. I know that. So. Everyone's saying how the next new iPhone, by the way, it's going to come out next year sometime. It's like it's supposed to be amazing, and it's going to be 5G. It's all this new stuff, but it's 5G. It's a mild upgrade to a network, and people are saying that the sales are going to go through the roof, and maybe they will. But consumers, I'm really curious. What do you guys think? Are you the kind of people that when a company releases a new product, even if it's only a slight upgrade, will you get it? Or will you wait a few generations? I mean, I will admit there is a massive upgrade between iPhone generation 1 and the iPhone X. That is a massive, massive upgrade. But from iPhone like 1 to 2 to 4S, they had Siri. That was kind of innovative, right? That was good. But for the most part, it's just the same thing. It's apps and music and web browser and calling and texting, right? It sticks to the same thing. So, anyways, so when they release the 5G, to me, it's not new. It's not that innovative to me, but who knows? It might sell, might not. Anyways, let's keep moving on here. So, to me, what Apple is going through right now is like what Microsoft was going through in like 1998, 1997, 98, 99, when they are at the top of the mountain. Like Apple is the top. It is the premier company right now. It is that giant crack dealer that has everyone addicted, and they've kind of stopped with their brand new innovating products, in my opinion. And so that's what happened to Microsoft in the 90s. They owned the software market. They owned everything. They owned that entire computer software market. It was theirs. Think about this. Microsoft stock was more valuable in 1999 than it was in 2015. All right? That's an astounding fact to me. Because they had the market, and then what happened? It was iTunes, iPod. Apple kept innovating. Yeah, sure, Microsoft did invent the Xbox, but PlayStation was out there, GameCube was out there. Xbox was a copycat innovator. It's still an amazing product. They did innovate, but that's a little bit different. It wasn't too game changing in terms of their bottom line for the first 10 years or so. But anyways, yeah, so that's how I view Apple right now. It's kind of what Microsoft was in the 90s. They kept pushing the same product and updating it, and it was great. Profits going through the roof, revenues going up, company is still great, still has a good long-term outlook. But people are going, oh, you're not really doing too much except for updating your top-selling product every year, which is fine. That's a good business model. But are you going to be a good 10-year investment? Are you going to be a good 7-year investment? That's the question that popped into investors' minds today because their unit sales have pretty much stayed the same or gone down, as I showed you. So that's why investors are a little bit worried here. And also some of the China-US trade relations, that's one of the reasons why I went down too. But investors are worried. They're worried that the iPhone sales have hit their peak and that Apple is relying on pricing increases to make them more profitable and grow more every quarter, which they might do, which that could happen. But there is going to be a point, if they solely rely on price increases, there will be a point where consumers will not be willing to pay X amount of dollars for a very marginal upgrade on a phone or a Mac or an iPad, whatever it may be. What is that price? I don't know. Apparently the average sale of an iPhone last quarter was almost $800. It's about $800. Again, that's still decent, especially for a super. If you think about it from a macro perspective, how much phones like this actually do for how much you pay for them, it's magnificent, actually. I mean, me personally, I'd be willing to pay just to have a phone, a smartphone, just to have any, not like the premium upgraded one, just to have one. I'd be willing to pay a few $1,000s for it, just for one. I wouldn't be willing to pay a few $1,000s for an upgrade, but just for one. And to have one, I'd pay a few $1,000s. And I'm sure that so who knows? Maybe their iPhone price will increase to $1,500, $2,000, right? I think that the iPhone X was over $1,000. Who knows? I don't know what the price point is where consumers will stop paying for the new iPhone, but I think that it's going to be a little bit closer than most people realize. Okay. So because of poor unit sales, by the way, this was such a public company move here. Okay, so because of the poor unit sales, they've decided that instead of trying to increase those numbers and appease Wall Street, they've just decided to not report unit sales anymore. They're deciding, you know what? Because people are so negative on how many units we're selling, we're just not going to tell you guys anymore. And that's fine, actually. From just, if I was not an investor and if I, just on the surface as a business person, that's fine to me. You're running a public company, do whatever you want. As long as you keep growing and innovating, that's fine. But the fact that this was in response to the poor unit sales numbers and the fact that their stock went down, that is kind of funny from my perspective. They're like, hey, you know what? Instead of trying to improve our company, we're just going to hide our faults. So what do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of them hiding their unit sales? From my perspective, it's a standard thing. A bunch of companies do it. I mean, if you were to go look at a bunch of companies' statistics, they don't really give you too much detail for the most part. They just give you kind of basic layouts of where their major revenue streams are coming from. A lot of companies, they don't break down their specific product sales. So the fact that Apple's not going to do this anymore, it doesn't really matter too much to me. It's just funny that it happened right after their first poor quarter for sales, for unit sales. Anyways, so lastly, the last thing I want to mention here on this Apple thing is for the first time since I can remember, they burned a large amount of cash. And so this is something I talk about so much in my videos, how it's a good thing for a company to have a big cash pile, but it's also an immoral thing to just hide all this money, to hide all this money overseas and not pump it back into the economy. And so for the first time since I can remember, they're pumping in $6 billion. They burned cash. So their cash pile last quarter was $243 billion. That's gone down to $237 billion because largely they pumped in a few $billion and signed some deals to promote original content creation on iTunes and iTunes shows, which is good. So that's a little bit of innovation there. I don't know. It's a good thing that they're burning through some of the cash and actually putting it back into the economy. From my perspective, a lot of people would because look, Apple is so profitable. They didn't burn cash because they're not profitable. They're one of the most profitable companies in the world. It's just I'm actually happy that they burned through some cash because Tim Cook, if you guys don't remember, he promised after the tax cuts to start reinvesting in the American economy, and based on their bottom line here. And the fact that they burned some cash, it looks like he's kind of holding up to what he said earlier in the year. So I'm really happy with that. So the conclusion here, my conclusion here is, so there's a question, did it deserve to get crapped on by investors? Did the stock deserve to go down 7%? No. It didn't. They had a really good quarter from my perspective. Revenue's up, profitability's up. I get it. From a 2 to 3 year outlook, Apple is still looking really, really good. And they may not have as fast a growth as they did this quarter, because 20% is still crazy from a revenue perspective. But they're still a giant company, and the fact that they've lost $70 billion in market cap in a few hours is that's kind of silly to me. And it's funny because Wall Street, typically Wall Street, they like to look at 6 to 18 month investment periods. I think Apple still looks pretty good from that perspective. I mean, if you were to look at them as from a 7-year perspective, 10-year perspective, maybe it would deserve to go down a few percentage points, but Wall Street doesn't do that. So I'm really curious. Maybe it's just because, as you guys have seen my videos, is that the tech sector has just been getting crapped on this past month. It did rebound a little bit over the past few days, but it was the worst month since the recession for tech, and maybe this is part of maybe this is part of it. But the thing is, Apple isn't really overvalued right now. I mean, let's look at their PE ratio. Their PE ratio is 17. So a 17 PE ratio is really good. For tech companies, it's usually 20, 25. 17 is decent, meaning that it's not an overvalued stock, which is, in terms of from a profit to price perspective, that's what it is. So PE ratio is the price to earnings ratio, and 17 is actually it's actually a decent number. So I don't know, just from my perspective here, it went down because of the sales numbers. I get it, and from lack of future innovation that they've announced. But yeah, just from a dollar and actual business perspective, it still looks pretty good. Still looks like a pretty good company. So from my perspective, again, what do you guys think, actually? So what do you guys think? Would you guys invest in Apple? Let me know in the comments down below. For me, I mean, I think that I always invest like a 5 to 10 year perspective. For me, that's what I always do. And for me, the 5 to 10 years is I would still be very positive on Apple, but a little bit more hesitant now. I'm a little bit more hesitant after the earnings report. So anyways, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. For now, that's going to wrap this video up. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Remember to check out joisk.com. By the way, we have another big update coming to Joisk soon. And oh yeah, I have a video coming out as to why I haven't been updating the business, how to start a business vlogs. There's been a macroeconomic situation in Canada that has happened over the past week and a half. And I will explain why that is. So I'll explain why I'm hesitant on selling a mass quantity of goods right now on Joisk, and why I may have to wait another few weeks. So for now, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. You are all very beautiful people. Remember to check out joisk.com, and I will see you guys in the next video.